This podcast is sponsored by Jobber. Jobber is a business software that can be used for all trades. I used it for my own tree service business and I absolutely love Jobber. I've been using Jobber, I can't remember now, probably for about a year, and it absolutely revolutionized just how easy and streamlined it makes everything. I run a very, very small business and I didn't think it could make too much difference because, I have a limited amount of quotes and invoices that I need to do the admin for, but even one quote, one invoice using Jobber just streamlines everything, makes it much quicker to do. I can do quotes and invoices straight from the app. I can invoice as soon as I walk off the job site. Once it's finished, I can get into my truck and send the invoice so it doesn't get forgotten about. I can set automated follow-up emails that follow up on quotes I've done. You can set the length of time, so you can follow up 3 days later, 5 days, 7 days, and you can do the same with invoices. Set follow-up emails for invoices as a reminder, and then that means that it saves you from having to remind your clients that they haven't paid, and you don't have to send that awkward email because it's done automatically for you. You can also set up job completion emails, have them ask clients for good reviews, that kind of thing. So Jobber just makes everything so much easier, and it seems to work exceptionally well for a tree care business because you can customize so many different things on there: quote templates, invoice templates, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to use Jobber or you want to give it a try, you can get a 14-day free trial. So if you click the link in the YouTube description, if you're watching this on YouTube, or you click the link on the climbingarborist.com website in the advertising banner across the top. So click the Jobber banner. That will take you to the Jobber website to get a free trial, and then if you sign up after the free trial, you get 20% off your first 6 months subscription. So that's 20% off your first 6 months subscription of Jobber, and you also get the 14-day free trial. So if you use the free trial, all I would say is just really commit to it and put every new client's details in there and really use it, and then you'll see the benefit that it gives you, rather than being a little bit half-assed and then not getting the full benefit. So yeah, go to the Climbing Arborist website, click on the Jobber banner, and get a great deal through Climbing Arborist. In this episode of the Climbing Arborist podcast, my guest is Zane Wedding from New Zealand. Zane is a really interesting guy, and we had a fantastic conversation. We spoke how Zane got into the industry. We spoke about his early years and his first ever crane job, and how he got himself in a little bit of trouble through his eagerness and his ego. We then spoke quite a lot about competition climbing, because Zane is really into competition climbing, and he says himself that it kind of defines who he is as a person, as an arborist, as a tree climber. And then we also speak about his latest role as a teacher down in New Zealand. So I hope you really enjoyed the podcast, and thank you for tuning in wherever you're listening, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy. Yo, how's it going?
Yeah, sweet, behind yourself.
Yeah, good, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, bye. You too. I'm just checking out all your shirts at the back there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've got there's a few reminders of different competitions and that. So
Yeah, bye. Hard out. There's some of them. I give a lot of my climbing comp shirts away. I just always have, but they are some of my favorite memories. Some of the better ones I always keep. So
yeah, I was keeping them, and I was like, I don't know what to do with these shirts, and the missus was just like, because they were stacking up, and she's like, what are you gonna do with all these? They're never gonna get used again. I was like, yeah, but I just can't throw them away. And then I was like, this idea came to me, and I was like, man, at least they'll get seen and get used and stuff if I just stick them all over the wall. So
yeah, the other good one is tree companies, the different tree companies you've worked for and stuff like that. Some of the tree companies in New Zealand have quite cool shirts, so it's good to get a bit of a collection
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
you know.
Nice. So well, I suppose first of all, how's everything with all this COVID-19 stuff going on in New Zealand?
Oh, but it's pretty crazy. Like just being locked up. It's nearly 3 weeks now. It's for people who are arborists and stuff. It's just starting to do your head in, you know. And I didn't prep very well. Heaps of people were ahead of it, so they're all at home painting their house and stuff like that. But I don't have any of that stuff to do, so I'm just like twiddling my thumbs, you know.
Are you so have you been told like are you on lockdown or are you just not working or like so you have to stay at home?
So I can work, bro, because I am a lecturer. So I work online. So that is kind of good. Although, because I'm not used to working at a table at an office all day, well, it can get a little bit stressful like that. But yeah, the whole of New Zealand's on complete lockdown, bro. You know,
Yeah.
there were police checkpoints today just from my house, so you couldn't go very far if you wanted to. You know.
Shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Like being luckily, so where I am, we're not on lockdown, and luckily things haven't got like so bad because everybody has been like pretty respectful of like, I think because we were behind the curve of other countries, like we had the advantage of seeing other countries getting in really bad positions, and so people started to almost follow what other countries were doing before it got to that state here, and
Yeah.
so it's not got so bad that they've said you got to stay inside. A lot of people have lost their jobs and stuff, which is terrible.
Yeah,
And
that's like by that's all that's all going to happen here as well, maybe to an even greater extent because of the lockdown. So it looks like we're going to squash the whole corona buzz over here. We've only had one death, and if we stay in here for another few weeks, we may be able to stamp it out altogether. But the economic flow-on effects could be disastrous. You know what I mean? A lot of small businesses will go under.
yeah, man, the economic state of every country is just like every country is just going to be in the complete shit. Like, and because they're all doing like the right thing. They're all saying, we're gonna pay a certain percentage of your wages if you've lost your job. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that, and they have to do that. So fair play. But after it's all said and done, every country's economy is just going to be down the toilet. And like,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose like the only way that they're going to claw it back again is like just raising everybody's taxes and stuff. And I can't see another way out of
Nah,
it.
like bro, because there's gonna, especially over here, there's gonna be so many people finding themselves on benefits, social welfare, income support from the government that like there's going to be no question that taxes are going to have to go up. There's going to have to be massive stimulus packages and all of that stuff just to get people back on their feet. And it'll be like, in this situation, those people who are like all for smaller governments are finding themselves begging the government for work and stuff. The only people who can work are getting work through government channels, and so that looks like it's the way it's going to be for a while. And
Yeah,
then you've just got the thing that we're a little island down the bottom of Earth. So we rely on export and all of that so much. And that's all just about to, bottom out. So it could be scary times. You just like, not just beating Corona is just the smallest part of what's about to happen. That's in my opinion,
yeah. It's obviously it's like unprecedented. Like nobody could ever have even imagined in the wildest dreams that this would happen in your lifetime. It's so like such a crazy scenario, and the only like positive to everything. Well, yeah, the positive is that, and I kind of, because of like the hippie side of me, and I suppose most arborists, like if you really care and love about nature and trees, is that I do feel like it is a part of nature saying, look, you humans are fucking up the planet and you're never going to do anything about it because you can't, because you're in this like snowball effect where you're just going to keep pushing technology and causing more pollution, and that it's almost like, right, this has got to happen. Shut, like, and they just, I don't know if it's a weird
I
thing to
like
say,
in
but
New Zealand, in Auckland in particular, like which traffic in the city is comparable to anywhere in the world. Um, Clear skies, no smog, anything like that at the moment. Like that's a good feeling. And just this morning when I was walking the dogs, there was a family kind of riding all their bikes together, and I was just like, oh, it's not like lockdown. It sucks, but it's also kind of it's just cool to see people getting back to kind of like a more just smaller type of living where you're not just out there polluting all of that stuff and people are getting by. It's being forced into the situation that even being able to work from home, all those things are just like, oh yeah, that's a benefit. You can't look at it as all doom and gloom. So yeah, the environmental effects are just awesome at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah. It's crazy. Like, so where I live, we have this like, just kind of like natural space behind. It's a bit of no man's land behind my house, and there's like a bunch of trees, and like it's nobody's garden. It's just, yeah, it's like it's no man's land because it can never get developed because there's no access via road or anything, and it's just this like hive of bird activity. And now more than ever, I suppose, because of like there's no like traffic noise anywhere, and yeah, like less pollution. It just seems like every morning the bird song is like, it's crazy. And yesterday I went out to this little island to do a little job, so it was like boat access. And as we're sailing out there, there was like this, I don't know if you'd call it a pod because it's seals, but there was like this gathering of like 12 seals all swimming along in like a group, like they're almost like synchronized swimming. It was crazy, like, and
Yeah.
it's just mad. I mean, that's not unusual to see seals, but just hearing stories about like, I heard like there was dolphins in like in a canal in Los Angeles and stuff, like crazy stuff like that. So it's definitely beneficial to nature, but as far as humans are concerned, it's obviously having a terrible effects on like illness and deaths of people and stuff. So
Yeah, for sure, bro. Definitely, and especially in some places, that stuff there is just catastrophic at the moment. It is good though, like yeah, to exactly like you say, to just not to be so busy to notice. Do you know what I mean? That we're like at the moment, you just everything's a little bit more chill, so you do hear the bird song in the morning. It's not like just the bustle of cars rustling by and stuff like that. So yeah, and my whole life, like since I was kind of like 16 or 17 years old, all I've done is work. So to be forced into kind of like 4 weeks where you're just like, no, you're not allowed. It's just like, oh, okay, cool, sweet, awesome, And I've got mates out there who are just like, this is the best time ever, just because they're in the same situation where working every day is the most familiar thing to them. So to be forced into 4 weeks of not doing anything is probably one of the healthiest things you could have done for some of these guys,
yeah,
a bit of
yeah,
time
just
off
to,
with the
yeah,
family.
because they would have probably never chosen that life, but being forced into it. As long as you have a positive outlook on things, and that you have things that you know you still get out of bed in the morning with a positive attitude and be like, right, today I can't go to work, so I'm gonna go and do all these things I love doing, or I'm gonna do all these tasks around the house that I've had on a list for like 3-4 years that I was probably never gonna get to, but I knew that needed doing. And
Yeah. And even just things like, in NZ, this whole Zoom thing is just blowing up. So you've got like, heaps of people out there who are doing like little webinars with each other and trying to keep that connectivity up between arborists within our little kind of bubble. And those are all cool things that people just never would have really got the time to do had they not been forced into the situation where, like, because we're just such naturally busy people, you try to fill in those times with productive activities. And I think this type of thing for, what's happening in New Zealand, where there's a ton of people doing them at the moment, will ultimately prove to be like a nice addition to the arboriculture scene down there where we have this on top of everything else that we've had for years, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Just maybe even like connect people more if people are getting together and doing more things, and um, people just chatting more because they can't be out physically doing anything. So maybe after a few weeks of being inside, they just need to have an outlet and just chat with each other about stuff.
Yeah. Well, so for me, like because I teach at wherever I teach it, I have so many connections that I'm always like, dude, you should come in for one day, take the students. But now those guys are, I know all of them are sitting at home doing nothing, and it's like, right, do a Zoom chat with me. We'll do a lesson, and I'll keep that lesson for my students. I'll pass it on to them. Like these kinds of things are nice additions, and it's forcing the hand of some of these arborists to be like, yep, all right. They always want to, but it's just, they've never been forced into a situation where they definitely have the time to do things like this.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So anyway, we kind of got off to a start on Corona, which I suppose is we had to do because that's what's going on around this time. But you give me a bit of a background on yourself. You live in New Zealand. You at the moment you teach arb.
Yeah. So like live in New Zealand. I've been an arborist since basically 2 days after I left school when I was 16 years old. So, and it's all I've ever done ever since. It's basically been my biggest passion. And I've done it heaps of different places, all across New Zealand, across Australia. It took me all around, basically around the world, especially through the comp things. And then, that's probably been one of the bigger things of my life has been, well, it's always been tree work. It's either been working on big tree jobs or just competing, being a competition tree climber.
Yeah. So what made so how did you actually start in the industry in general? So what did somebody introduce you to arb work, or you kind of knew a friend of a friend or a family friend?
Bro, I got it's just a weird lot of circumstances. I got expelled from high school, and my brother was doing arboriculture, and he knew a crew that was shorthanded like the day after I got expelled from school, and it was like a really prolific New Zealand arborist who came, knocked on my door, and just was like, "Hey, dude, do you want to come to work today?" And I went out that day, and I just like that day it was Andy Neverman. Just like that day I was expelled from school, didn't know what I was going to do with my life at all. He knocked on the door, and ever since then I've done tree work. So yeah, Andy Neverman. I was lucky enough to work with him for a short stint of time just before he shot off overseas, and then when he came back from overseas, I was real lucky that I got to spend an extended period, and he kind of groomed my style in the arb game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you've always lived in Auckland, and is that where you started?
Yeah, I started in Auckland, and I was there for at Treescape where I very first started. I was there for a good 6 or 7 years, from kind of 16 to 22 before I went anywhere else. But they were throwing me all around the country. I was lucky enough to be flying helicopter jobs when I was kind of 19, 20 years old, crane work even younger. So because of that company that I was in and the exposure to the big tree work that I got, that's what kind of kept me there. When I was young, on that day when I saw Andy Neverman climbing, I was like, damn, that's what I want to do. And there were just the first days that I walk into the yard, because Treescape is a big company. They would have back then 40 different not crews but workers there, and the climbers used to just have that kind of big dick energy around the yard. And as a young dude, I was just like, oh, that's kind of what I want to be. And because Treescape would get such big work, I wasn't going anywhere. That's all I wanted to do was just high-end rigging, big crane work, helicopter work, that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Why I've got a question. I asked somebody else this, but why is it that in New Zealand helicopter work is such a common occurrence, whereas pretty much everywhere else in the world you would hardly ever do it? Is it just because
Uh,
like access and stuff?
uh, like, but once you do a couple of helicopter jobs, you realize that, like, oh damn, this tree that usually you would rig down in 2 days and speed line across a gully or something like that disappears in a matter of hours, sometimes even minutes. Like if you go there the day beforehand, pre-strop, mark out your cuts, and you've only got a single tree to do, you might be paying $2,000 for a couple of hours, $2,000 an hour for the helicopter, but the whole tree's gone in a matter of hours. So all up, tree only costs like $10,000 to get out, where you could end up spending that amount of time just burning it in man hours and days. You know what I mean? And so once you get used to them, you kind of look at trees through that helicopter lens. How long would that take me to fly it? 4 hours. The economics of it starts to work out a little bit better. It's just about giving it a chance. The crane work is the same. A lot of the time people are like, oh man, that's so much money to get that crane here. But then by the end of the day, the efficiency, it all kind of works out,
Yeah. But I suppose as well, like, so coming from the UK and working in the UK and seeing what like the access was like around properties, whereas like every road is like so narrow and back gardens may not have like a rear access, and like you have to
walking through houses.
Walk through the houses. You've done it as well.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like working in North America, working in Canada, every single house has a garden, has access around the back, has a lane at the back. So I suppose like from working in North America and being here, I can't really imagine a helicopter would ever be necessary unless you're doing work in like such a remote place. So I suppose
so bro, like the thing about helicopter work and how it's planned out a lot of the time is like think about a railway line where there may be a group of trees that overhang the railway line, that all that is there is remote access by the railway or something like that, and then you can't foul them over the lines. Rigging them down may take weeks, so you'll fly them out in those situations. And what can happen sometimes is if you're with a bigger company, is they will see or engage with the different like corporates and they will bulk book a helicopter to do work all across the nation in a big stint. What you find sometimes is they're like, okay, you've got a helicopter job here, and you'll run down the length of New Zealand, good 6 week stint, just doing all the helicopter work that you can in 6 weeks across the length of the country in all of these remote areas, and that's a lot of time, that's how it's worked. It's all kind of like planned out so that you're doing not just one at a time, but doing a big stint of them. And then it can be the other way too. It can be that you just come across a pocket of trees that are over a dam. You can't get a chipper to it or something like that, and then you're flying those trees out. So it's really, once people start doing it, just has the flow-on effect of continuously doing it. Because I know for a fact some of the helicopter work that I've been a part of has been those companies' most profitable jobs, because the tree, like I've flown 150 ton in a day, and that's profit. You know what I mean? No one foresees people making that kind of wood to disappear in a day. So you're cutting days off your work schedule, and because you've booked an helicopter at $20,000 a day, every day you knock off, you're making quite a bit of profit on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. I think as well is like because it's quite common in New Zealand now. Some like tree companies will see other tree companies doing it, and then they'll see what helicopter companies, and then they'll be able to contact that company, find out rates, and the company's familiar with tree work. Whereas like if I found a helicopter company near me and been like, oh, I want to take a tree down using a helicopter, do you do that? They'll be like, what the hell?
Fuck?
Like, yeah.
100%. But that's what it's like. And that's the thing. Like, over the years, bro, I used to have, and you'll still find, there'll be people here who just have these wicked relationships with their pilot, and there are pilots that would fly for me for weeks on end, and we'd have this, you're not in contact with them, but they have like a visual of you at all times, and you're speaking through sign language, and just what they do. And so you do end up with this massive trust relationship with them. If you get a pilot who's never done like tree work before, they're as much as a danger to you as you are to them, because you can sink helicopters real quick. And I've seen helicopters let go of bits heaps. You know, it's so easy to overload them. And, you know, when you hear that everything, it's a multi-sensors thing. So when you hear a helicopter take weight with a bit that's like too heavy for it, you hear all the propellers like way down, and it can be kind of like, whoa. So you do need to be making sure that someone who's doing that lifting process with you is like understands the process, all of it, like of lifting a load that tips over and moves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I imagine. Well, I mean, I've done a few crane jobs myself, and like crane work, if either the operator doesn't know what they're doing or the arborist doing it doesn't know what they're doing, like everybody thinks, oh yeah, crane work's really easy because you know a few cuts and the tree's down, but in reality, yeah, it can be so easy because a whole tree, you know, it can be down in a matter of hours. But if you don't know what you're doing, or if the crane operator doesn't know what they're doing, it can be the most dangerous thing like that you could ever do. And I imagine that helicopter work it just takes it to the next level, because
yeah, definitely, bro. There's you know, you look at a tree a lot differently when you're flying it than you do a crane job. You're not trying to balance loads or anything like that, but like, yeah, definitely that can all be, and just it's the helicopter part is one thing. Getting fed like not irrelevant information, but when you're doing helicopter work, it's a real cat and mouse game when you're talking about weights. Like, I have been the person flying, but on every crane and chopper operation in New Zealand, you have the person that's called like your dogman, the guy who's picking the weights, who's talking to the chopper pilot, and he's also talking to the climber, but there's no connectivity between the climber and the chopper pilot ever. So, you know, like if you're stropping the tree, you're like, oh, how big is this piece? And he'll be like, yeah, that's 600. And then you'll lift it off. And the chopper pilot sometimes will tell you like, oh, no. That bit that you thought was going to be 900 was actually 1200 when it was 900. But you're just playing this cat and mouse game of making sure that you're never overloading it. You know what I mean? So if you don't have that between chopper pilots, if he's giving you back like real readings every single time, if he tells you that that's 12 and your variance is out by a little bit, you can sink him real easy. So you have to have this real like secrecy between, you have to communicate, but at the same time you have to keep yourself like your safe work within your safe working limits when you're talking about this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how many helicopter jobs have you done where you've actually been the climber?
By too many to count. Like hundreds,
oh, really?
You know. Yeah, heaps, shitloads.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. And so, who taught you, or who showed you how to do it on like the first ever one you did, and how like? What did they explain to you to try and make it as safe as possible, like for your safety and for the crew's safety and everything?
So, like, funny story, my very first cut, it was funny, but like, this is what I'm talking to you about like being an enthusiastic young climber. When I was that age, the night before, because everyone knew this chopper job was going down in amongst treescape, and the night before, they were having a site meeting, and I was young, and we have finished for the day. So I was like, oh, let's drive up for the site meeting. And I went up there, and I was only young. We jumped over the fence and went in and, you know, like started talking. And then I just pulled aside the foreman at the time, and his name, there's a few of them. There's a dude, Brent McCarthy, another dude, Shane Balsam, just like legends over here. And I jumped the fence and I just started having a talk to them like, I want you guys to know that one day I want this to be me, just to let them know, like, you know, coming up, I want to be a climber. This is what I want to do. And I got home, it's like 7 o'clock at night, and they were like, be at the yard at 5 o'clock in the morning. And like, dude, I'm like 19 years old, you know, like nearly 20 years old. They're like, be at the yard at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're flying tomorrow. And I was like, oh, damn. I'd hardly even climbed with the 4.6 before. you know, like, and but it was the craziest thing. I had a guy sitting at the bottom of my tree just sharpening a 66 all the time, all day. And the helicopter flew into me. I was watching a few other people because scattered across this ridge line would be 6 different climbers. And the good climbers, the chopper's going to them all the time. And then you'll get the call on your headset like, yo, it's coming to you. And it's, oh, yo, sweet, all right, comes to me. And the chopper flies in and it gives you the hook. And I catch the hook and clip the strop in. It flies up. And as it flies up, there's this small deviation in the line. And I look down to the dude who's on the ground, the dogman, this guy Shane, and I'm like, yo, if he's listening by, he'll freak out when he hears this stuff. I'm like, yo, it's wrapped around this branch. I can't cut it. And he's like, don't worry, I'll fly it out. And I'm like, no, that's never going to work. It's stuck on this branch. I'll just go up there and cut it. And he's like, don't do that. But I'm young. And I jump above the strop and cut it. And as soon as I cut it, the strop goes like tight, boom, and it pins me to the tree. And like, I'm stuck there. And he's like, what the fuck, dude? I just told you don't do that. And I was like, sorry, bro. So he flies down a bit and I crawl out from underneath the strop. I go down to where we've set it out to cut it. And I put my first cut in and then I do my second cut. But at this time, like my heart is just like racing. So I put my second cut in and I cut above, because, you know, you're just doing step cuts. And I cut above my first cut, just not thinking, rushing. Chopper flew off with the piece with my saw still in it. And I was lifted me out of my spikes bar. I ripped the saw and, you know, like ripped the bar out of it. So I had to send the saw straight down. But like my very first chopper cut was like one of the worst experiences of my life. You know, so, but that's just, you know, that's just what it is when you've got like young people who, you know, think that they're
too
awesome.
keen. Yeah.
You know, so like the chopper didn't fly back to me after that for another couple of hours. And one of my mates was in the tree, like next to me. And, you know, like he was like a couple of years older than me, max. And he looked at me and was like, what the fuck are you doing? I was just like, I don't know. Like, you know, so, but yeah, so after that, that's kind of the role I assumed as a kind of 19 to 20-year-old climber, was just the runt of the litter. There'd be like all these dope climbers and they'd get to do all the big stuff. And then Zane would get sent down to like, see that shitty little tree right at the bottom of the gully there that you have to climb through the swamp and go up, set 2 strops in and make 2 cuts. That is where I kind of started. And then I would like transition through different things, you know?
Yeah. So if you were working for Treescape, which is a huge company in New Zealand, I've always found that the larger companies, you struggle as a new guy to even get the opportunities to climb. So did you get given quite a few opportunities to climb? Was it like a quick progression because of the caliber of guys there, or was it still every few months?
So one of the biggest advantages for me was just to be like underneath Andy's wing, when you were like underneath the guy's wing. And then my brother was a bit like that too, bro, if I'm being honest. And because I was my brother knew all the top dudes and he was like one of the better climbers. They all knew me, so I kind of had like a foot in the door in that way. But bro, I don't know. Do you know Dale Thomas, bro? You must know Dale Thomas.
No, I know who he is. I've never met him, no.
Yeah, so me and Dale were like besties. And he's the same, bro. Like, but he was a climber like me when he was young and he turned up at 16 or 17 years old. Like, he always stood up and was like, I want to do that big tree. And when it was squeaky wheel will always get that grease eventually in a company like that. And so, yeah, if you go in and you throw your toys out the cot, sometimes you'll end up flying. By being on all of these jobs, the real thing is like when it's your time to fly a tree, you kind of want to be ready. You don't want to be that guy on a site that there's something is up there and it's costing you a couple of dollars per second. And you're the dude who can't finish his cuts off right or doesn't understand like lean and secondary lean. So you don't know how to place your saw in a way where it won't get caught. And I've seen choppers sitting above people for like a couple of minutes and just like looking down at the people who are paying for that chopper, like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? So you put your hand up, but otherwise you just end up in a situation like I was, where you're kind of flying yourself out of a tree one day. You know what I mean?
So with the attitude that you had when you were young, like not really any experience, but you were like kind of almost like so eager, that must have got you in some sticky situations early in your climbing career. Like tell me some of the things that you kind of put your hand up and said, I want to do that, and then you got up there and you kind of royally fucked shit up.
Oh, heaps, man. Heaps, like tons of times. And nowadays, by being in the role that I'm in, I'm quite wary of that, because I have heaps of young people underneath me. The confidence that these kids have, and then they will follow through with stuff that they shouldn't do. So look, I have countless amounts of experiences of just either mistying knots or blowing blocks out, like blowing up big rigging pulleys when I'm like, yeah, this head will come down that gap real easy, and just like totally overestimating what gear is good for, and all of those, like, fusing up pulley wheels, all those kinds of things, snapping cables when it comes to excavator, like pulling things over with the excavator, tons of things like that. I think though one of the best things for me though was there's been a couple. I had a fall once, but one of the best things for me was when I was younger, we had a big gum tree. It leant over a building, and there wasn't really an anchor point for me to go have a floating anchor above it or anything like that. So I had to go up and snatch the whole thing out. And when I got up there, it was dead, and I was shaking, and Dale was on the ground for me, and I didn't go through with it. Like, it was the very first time that I actually was like, oh, nah. I like kind of felt like if I had done that, then, it would have pulled over with me in it. And it may not have. Now I wouldn't have even climbed the thing. But I can remember calling my boss and just being like, no. I'm not doing this. I've been up it. I don't feel like it's safe. And he was like, oh, cool. We'll just get a crane to do it. And that was like a revelation for me. Like, oh, what? Oh, okay. Well, that was what we should have done in the first place. Do you know what I mean? Just being in that moment when I was younger, where I was like, are you going to chicken out of this? But I'd already had heaps of mistakes at that point where I hadn't. So it became one of those moments that just is so distinctive of being that moment where I remember thinking, nah, there's got to be another way. Let's not do, you know what I mean? And I know for a fact I was sent to that job because I was one of the people that probably would have, Zane will go out there and he won't call me up. He won't, you know what I mean? In that moment when I'm up there and just going through like, fuck, I've got to pull out of this. Yeah. That was like a real moment for me when the boss didn't respond poorly, and like everyone was like, thank God you did that. I was really worried for you, the people who were in my crew. Nowadays, I try to like push the whole like, bro, if you're worried, let's talk about that. Because you don't want to ever have a situation where, I actually know the one I would have told now. But yeah, you don't want to have a situation where you like knew something would go wrong, and then you're at the end, you're like, yeah, I knew that wasn't going to work. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's one of the biggest issues in tree work is that the fact that your ego can really put you in a bad position. Like a lot of people, depending on the level of experience you have, would be in that similar position to what you were, and just be like, oh well, I can't call the boss because the boss is gonna say this, that, and the other. He's gonna like shout at me. All the crew is gonna think I chickened out. This, that, and the other. And like a lot of the time, that pressure, either that you do get from your own crew, or that you think it's just like the foresight of what they might say. That can really put us in some bad positions, because if you're not man enough to to stand up and say, actually, I'm shit scared because this tree I've got up here and we didn't see from the ground what I can see now, and it's like, punky as hell, it's like it's just kind of falling away like at my spikes, and I can't, it's there's been I think the worst time is when you're like maybe 2 to 4 years in, so you're fairly new,
definitely.
but you have the experience to do jobs and jobs that could be quite dangerous, but you don't have enough experience to be like, no, this is stupid.
And I was in that place where I was kind of transitioning from like being a crew member to being a crew leader type of thing. And so now you're in the position of responsibility. It's that time where you're not quite used to calling up the boss. It's always been somebody else who's done that. The biggest thing though for me, like in that, exactly what you're saying when you're talking about like this thing that's going on in your head, sometimes it's just like that pressure it's just going on in your head. The person on the ground wants you to stop doing it. Even your boss is like, yeah, I thought that shit was dodgy too, but I thought I'd send you out there and see what you thought. And then you're like, oh, what the hell? You know what I mean? So a lot of the time you've just got to breathe and be like, does anyone else think that I should be doing this? And most often, if you're the most experienced person on site and you're freaking out, everyone else is freaking out too. They're all like, bro, I hope that this is all right. You know what I mean? So that was the biggest thing when I got down, was just to be like, wait, everyone else on the ground thought that this was dumb as shit. Why didn't someone just tell me not to do it? You know what I mean? So
a lot of the time it's like it's about having or opening up the conversation just to check what everybody else thinks. Because if you don't say, and then you're the most experienced, then they maybe don't want to like speak up and say, actually, I think this is a bit dodgy. Because if they feel like you're going ahead and climbing it anyway, then you must feel comfortable. Whereas if you just stop for a second and be like, right, this is a situation, guys, there's more decay than I thought there was in this tree, or it's like it's stone dead at the top, or whatever it is. They might say, yeah, it kind of doesn't feel right to us, and sometimes it's just about having the conversation, because maybe they don't want to say anything.
Like, so in when I'm working with some of the better climbers and we might be doing, big pruning lots or something like that, we do implement like the right to veto someone else's roping point. So, I'll walk over to someone and be like, you're not roping into that. And they'll be like, all right. I'll be like, all right, it's nothing for you to shoot or double bag it into the one lower than that, then go up and check. If you make that kind of like something that is you openly welcome on site, like check your climber's rope, make sure that that's all right. That little thing is just like a pathway to success, to have those conversations about real world things. Like, do you think that's all right? Because I know, I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to be sweet with that. But the dude standing next to me is like, you're going to rope into that, let them speak up. And if they don't have the experience to understand why, then cool. But if they do, then you should always listen to that point of view. And whenever, I know there's another one, me and Dale, we actually had a big bit of wood off, and he had said to me, he was like, oh, take it around your legs. And I was like, down here. And I was like, okay then. And then we blew the pulley out that we were rigging out on, and he was like, I was only joking. And I was like, oh shit. What I mean? We were both only joking. But because he said it was right, and I thought, oh, okay, let's do this then. Like, let's go big. We ended up ruining the pulleys. No big deal, but just those kinds of things. It's like sometimes looking out for your mates, speaking up is the easiest way to get out of a situation that could have fucked you up,
Yeah. And a good point that you just raised is that just letting everybody that you work with around you got to speak up if you don't agree with something that I'm doing, or you need to create a culture where you're happy for each other to call each other on things, and just not for everybody to get upset. Like, don't get pissy if somebody calls you on something that you're doing that's unsafe. Like, you have to generate that culture where call each other out on stuff that's either unsafe for you, unsafe for your groundsman. It's just plain stupid. Because if somebody's like more inexperienced but but you like intimidate them, so they're never gonna say anything because they're just like, oh, he's gonna have a go at me if I tell him that time point's too weak or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah. And like those are learning opportunities for everybody at that point. But let's have the discussion. This is how I know that roping point isn't gonna break. Do you know that I'm loading it that way, and all these different things that you may have implemented for someone who's a little bit less experienced, and you can use that as like a teachable moment for people a lot of the time where they're like, "Oh, are you gonna rope into that?" But well, here's why I can. If you don't done it this way, you definitely couldn't have. And then there might be times where like I appreciate that you said that and now I'm not going to. You know what I mean? And I have by like I'm like lucky enough and unlucky enough to have been on sites where people have been hurt, or there have been moments where I've been like, oh damn, like something's about to go wrong here. And those are shitty moments. Those are real shitty moments. Those moments of like absolute powerlessness where you're like looking at someone like, oh shit, he's about to get fucked up. Or it's you who's feeling that. And that's like the reality of our job in these windows of your career where you don't have the experience to make those good calls. Once you kind of transition to a certain place, I feel like tree work becomes one of the safest jobs you can do, but you have to get the like transition through those periods where you have to contend with ego and all of these other things.
yeah, what I've found is that I'm lucky enough now because I run my own company. I can choose who I surround myself with. So I surround myself with guys that either come and climb for me or come and ground for me. But I know that they're knowledgeable enough, and they're quite happy to even like question me on some of my decisions that I might make. That it keeps me safe because some guys that you work with maybe when you were younger or work for bigger companies, there's always like those ground guys, especially that are just there for a paycheck, don't give a shit about the job. They're just turning up like 7 o'clock till 4 o'clock or whatever, and they're just looking at the ground the whole time. They're not paying attention. They're tripping over their own shoelaces. They're never sorting out your climbing rope. Your climbing rope can get dragged in the chipper because they're not paying attention and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's like you can be as safe as you can be, but you still need like good people around you to like pull you up on stuff because
and like what you're talking about there, that in the New Zealand market at the moment, that's one of the kind of things that a lot of contract climbers have to navigate. Like you'll be going from crew to crew, as a good contract climber contracting to different companies. And one of the things that pushed me away from doing that was just the fact that I was always, new dude, don't know you. Hey, look out for my rope. If you are in a situation where you've got familiarity with your crew, it's just such a huge advantage to you. And I've worked on crews where, man, we could not say a word to each other all day, but things just flow like clockwork. And that's when tree work is at its just best, what I mean?
That's when it's so much fun because everybody knows what's going to happen next. Like nobody needs to say anything really. It's just it's like you're saying, it's just flowing.
And those are always the environments where the most creative and best techniques kind of come out, because you've got many minds looking at trees through different perspectives, and someone will be like, oh, should we do it this way? And like, what if we did this? And then all of a sudden now we're speed lining out this piece in a really nice way, or whatever it might be. But just having that like welcomed input from something can make sites flow, but also be like really creative, and that's what I love about tree work, is that it does allow you to do kind of cool things every day mentally, where you're kind of really engaged in how this is going to happen, and you can bounce ideas off one another and just have a really awesome work environment.
Yeah. So when you obviously you worked in New Zealand. What other countries have you worked in?
I worked in Australia for a while, and I've done like heaps of climbing comps all around the place. I've had criminal convictions, bro, since I was like a 16-year-old kid. So I've never been I was only allowed to visit America last year and stuff, but like always was the dream. But I had just got back from kind of a 6-year stint in Australia where Treescape started up over there. And I was lucky enough to be just like hit up by the dude who was starting it up, like, come over and let's go into this market in Australia. We kind of, like, when I very first started there, they were a company of like, I don't know, 7 people. And now they've got kind of 300 staff there. So that
Wow.
was real cool. Yeah. And they've done very much the same thing as what they've done in New Zealand, where they, like implemented crane work to be something that is over there and done heaps more. And the different procedures that Treescape have developed around that, taking them to Australia was really cool too, because you see nowadays the people who are over there, they are really like in Treescape, proactively seek out crane work, making it a lot easier. And when I first started there, you'd be rigging down these trees in 40-degree heat, just like, man, if we were craning this out, we would have been done 3 hours ago. You know what I mean? So it's really cool to see what they've done over there.
So they
And Australia.
are they actually a bigger company in Australia now than what the New Zealand company is, or the New Zealand?
It'll be close. It'll be close. Like, because they're in Brisbane, Sydney, they go to Canberra all the time. They're all over the place. In Australia, it'll definitely be close. But they're not as cemented in the industry in Australia as what they are in New Zealand. In New Zealand, they're just like, you can't avoid them. And Australia is such a big place. They don't have the same kind of force that they do have in New Zealand. But it's still cool. It's still cool over there. And the best thing about Australia, bro, is just the wildlife there. The way they treat wildlife and all of that, that was just like, wow, this is cool. Because you come from New Zealand where there's none of that, then all of a sudden you're climbing trees with goannas and snakes and all types of shit.
Yeah. So like you mean the being respectful to the wildlife and like the laws that
Oh
they have
yeah.
to like protect the wildlife and stuff?
Yeah, bro. So when I first got to Australia, I was every day working with a spotter catcher where they would go out and they would kind of look for sign of trees and mark trees that you knew that possums were nesting in. And a lot of the time, you'd either have to flush those possums out or wait till you knew the possum was gone, going up there and checking on it. And in New Zealand, that's not a thing. In New Zealand, if there's a possum in a tree, see you later, possum. And so all of that was just a massive eye opener to me, and something that I like became super fond of while working over there was just, okay, let's manage wildlife while being a part of working with nature, which is just way better to do it that way.
Yeah. I remember the first time I came across a possum when I worked in Australia. I can't remember. I think it must have been a eucalyptus tree because pretty much every tree I remember
Everything is.
doing was a eucalyptus tree. Yeah, and then like I was climbing up and there was like this big union where all these huge stems came out of. And I was there like ascending up and I kind of was about eye level with this union and this like possum just popped its head up and I was like, Jesus Christ, like because I think I must have been working there for long enough where I'd got comfortable to not, because like I remember my first few days, every tree I got up I was like, I just imagining a snake to jump out at me
Yeah,
and like bite me or
100%.
something. Whereas so I must have been at least like 3-4 weeks in where I'd like settled down a bit and I wasn't like on edge. And then like this possum popped his head up and Jesus, I almost like fell out the tree. It was
Yeah. Well, bro, like that would happen to me, like even 6 years in, seeing them, you'd be like, well, but I just like, I never knew there were things like gliders and stuff. Like, bro, I come from a part of New Zealand where you don't get a lot of exposure to like all wildlife or anything. So when you're in Australia and you're just like a little moldy boy, you go up these trees and there's like little rats that fly. You're like, holy shit, like what was that? And then just all the bird life, like that was what was the coolest thing about Australia to me. Like the tree work is always good. You always got like big eucalyptuses, and you're either pruning them or just smacking them over. But just being around the wildlife, man, seeing all of those cool things, the massive ass spiders and the kangaroos floating around, it's just like that's a different world. And they're only 3 hours away from me. So it's
Yeah.
cool as.
So when did you first start what competing? When was your first competition?
99. 99. So yeah, but when I was, because I live with my brother, when I was young and I very first started in '98, the New Zealand champ, he's got his name on the trophy. He was actually for a guy from England, a guy John Washbourne, awesome dude. Um, he won the New Zealand championship and he was living at my house, and we had that New Zealand title sitting on my fireplace for a year, and he got me to go to a nationals in 1998, and I watched it. And I was, I just started climbing there, but at that time I was like, what? This is a sport too? Like that was just to the next level to me. And so the next year I was climbing, and I've never not done climbing comp since then, you know. Yeah.
until
Climbing comps is like,
until this year.
yeah. Well, I even done one. I was lucky enough to go down to
did
the Wellington one this year before Corona hit.
Oh, you got in.
But yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking not to have the comp scene going on like it usually is, because it's just such a massive part of my life, you know?
Yeah, same with me. Like, there's, I always kind of, the certain ones are always in the same months, and so
Yeah.
right, the third weekend in July and the second weekend in August, like there's going to be competitions, and you can sort of plan your schedule even before they've been like the locations have been released, because it's always like the same weekend, and it's it's all gone up in the air at the moment.
Big time, right? And, like it's just the connection that I have with so many people around the world is centered around that, and I'm really invested in some people's success. So right now, I'm usually used to being, on the internet, talking to my mates, being like, okay, look, you're pushing towards this date. What are you doing for training after work? How's that all going? Are you working on this? How did that comp go? Because that's how, like, climbing comps never used to be this way. Like, not, they kind of did, but not like to the extent they are now, where people are just so focused. They're training like actual athletes train for these things at this point in time. At least some of my mates are. And, like for that not to be happening, it's a whole different world I'm living in. Like, Corona, what have you done to me?
Yeah. But it's like the evolution of the sport, really, isn't it? Because it's like any sport. Like, the longer it's been around, and like even now, like sports that have been around since the early '90s they're still evolving. Like, football, players are coming up with like new tricks and techniques, and same with like even in like NFL or basketball, and especially like mixed martial arts and stuff, which is like a newer sport. The guys are like just coming up with like new techniques and new moves all the time. So for tree climbing competitions that started in like maybe the 80s or something
I'm
like
not
that.
even sure, yeah.
Yeah, that like it's still so new that maybe into the 90s, early 2000s, it was maybe only like the top guys who were actually putting in the time and effort to go and train, whereas now I think it's becoming more and more common, because like certain people are elevating the game, and so if you want to be competitive, you've got to
like
do what you
that's
can
the super reality of 2020 climbing competitions is if you're not training, you're definitely not competing. You know what I mean? Like, you might get a lucky day, whatever, but if you're talking about long game, there's guys I know that have got just some, like your like even myself, like your I practice my ascent setup, at least I did until this year, so much that I should be averaging around a good kind of 8-second, 7-second setup. And you're not gonna hit that on game day unless you fluke it. You're not gonna hit that consistently unless you're practicing and practicing and practicing. And I just, I know people who are doing at least 4 20-meter ascents a night, every two nights a week, 3 nights a week at least. So, just drilling those habits is where the game is at the moment. And it's so good for tree climbing. It's so good because everyone's out there thinking of new systems, techniques, you know. Sometimes I'm seeing techniques that I'm like, wow, you just invented something that was invented 10 years ago, but go for you. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's just like what's happening out there. There's so many young climbers that are all just like bouncing ideas off each other, and it's awesome, you know?
Yeah, that's how just the industry evolves, and I found for me so um I worked in the UK and then I went to Australia for a year and I worked there. And even before I got to Australia, I was just so sick of tree work. It just driven me mad because I worked for a small company and I was the only guy that could climb, and the guys on the ground were just there making up numbers. They had no interest in learning to climb. So there was nobody like teaching me new stuff. I wasn't going to competitions, so I wasn't learning anything new. So what I knew was what I'd been shown by my boss, and that was it. And then so I wasn't like, my skills weren't evolving. And so I got to Australia and I was looking for any job I could get. I wanted to work in a shop, just like the most mundane job, just so I didn't have to do tree work because I was sick of it. And I couldn't get a job, so I called up a tree company and like, yeah, I was working the next day.
Wow.
And then I went to New Zealand and I was like, right, I like this time I'm definitely not doing tree work. So I just got another job in New Zealand, and then when I came to Canada, I was like, right, I suppose I best start being an arborist again, just because I need to earn some money, and like not long after I got my first job, I met some guys. And they were talking about competitions, and they were like, "Oh, there's a competition coming up. You should sign up for it." And I was like, "Man, in the UK, I always wanted to compete, but I never did." And I was like, right, I'm in this new country, I have this new company, just started tree climbing again. What the hell? I'll sign up. And after that first competition, man, my love for tree work came back because I made every day at work almost like training for a competition. I was just thinking
I've been
about,
doing that since I was 18 years old, bro. Exactly that.
yeah,
Every day for me is training for a competition. I just don't never take it out of my mind. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
And it makes it like, for me, it makes the job so much more fun because otherwise, you know, yeah, it's still a good job because you're out in the fresh air and stuff. But on shitty days where it's pouring with rain and like freezing cold, those are the days where, like, if you think about the way that you limb walk or something, or you try a different setup just to see how it performs, like those things can turn a shitty day into like a pretty fun day, like.
But I always think like on those shitty rainy days, because I always think nationals it rains. It rains in nationals. Like, enjoy this time. That's really conceited of me. I haven't got my spot at the nationals yet, but but usually that's what I'll think. I'll think like it rains at the nationals. You could be doing a comp in the wet. Get up there and try and climb fast. You know what I mean? Try and stay smooth, saying, because like my whole life has been centered around. I used to, before the climb everything stuff that we do, I used to have a hoodie that was like, "This is my life." Because by climbing comps, climbing, it's my life. And so when whatever I do, I do that with that in mind, that okay, I'm throwing this throw ball. Remember, replicate the things that they do at the comps, and that has grown me into a much better arborist because of it. Just like a safer arborist, because I'm trying to replicate those things. Then now, like I work with tons of at-risk youth through what I do as a lecturer. And sometimes I'll get students and they are looking for a job. They want to be an arborist. They don't really know what it is. I'll take them to the comps, and that's what they want to do. You know what I mean? And that becomes the catalyst to them becoming an arborist in a larger degree. But I'll always take them to the comps and be like, watch the speed climb, watch the ascent. I've taught you how to ascend, watch some, and then a lot of them come back and they're like, I can ascend faster than that. I know I can, and that's it. We're off to the races. So the comps are just this vehicle, and not only that, without the comps, look, I still would have been a dope arborist. I know that, but I wouldn't have the the standing that I have within the New Zealand arb industry without my involvement in the comps, that like, man, some of these comp climbers, they're super close to me. All my, my closest workmates have been competitive climbers at one stage or still are now. You're pushing for this, like, I'm pushing to be that New Zealand champ, world champ, have been for ages. So are my mates, and I'm pushing them along with me because that's the kind of competition it is. It's one of those competitions where everyone's like, you do good too. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so because you're so into the tree climbing comps, so the first time I met you in person was at the NZ conference, right? And
Yeah.
like I knew of you because a friend of mine, Tiger, and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Man.
and I think a couple of other people I know you, so I knew who you were, but I'd never met you before. And the first like when the competition started, I was like, the one voice I could hear above everybody else's was yours, and it's just like you can sense the passion of yours coming through. Is that you in every walk of life, or is it just because you're so passionate about competitions that you just want everybody to do so well?
Um. Oh, but it is that supporting kind of aspect of me is something that like defines me as a person big time. But bro, going back to that 16-year-old kid who just got expelled and shit like that, like, bro, I was not in a good place in my life, like, and in the world, by like a little teenage drug addict type of thing. And comps, like, and arboriculture, bro, really saved me in that way. So whenever I see anyone at a comp, bro, like, I'm giving back the same energy that comps have given me. Do you understand what I mean? So like, bro, I'm just so, and so like, bro, arboriculture, same as Treescape, bro. When Treescape called me and were like, oh, okay, do you want to come to Australia? We've got this. Well, of course I'm going to say yes to them. Then they are the reason that I'm standing here now, and I owe that to comps and NZR. I owe them that same thing where I'm like, okay, you guys put me on, like, and so whenever I'm at a comp, if I have the opportunity to, then I will always just like expend as much energy kind of cheering for these people as I do like actually competing. And but the funniest thing is that year, but that was the most low key Zane you'll ever at it, because I'd never that year, but I'd never been so. The year before, I made the Masters, and I wanted to prove to myself it wasn't a fluke. I wanted to just, like, when I made that Masters, I've known for years that I have been Masters, like, and I've mastered in other countries, but I've known I've been like that caliber. But when I went through the first year, like, my fitness wasn't, I hadn't been practicing like I should have been, and I didn't put my best foot forward in the Masters. So that next year, I promised myself, like, still cheer, but don't give so much of yourself to the comp that it affects how, like, the fact that you want to be in that Masters, that top four at the end of the day. And when they called my name for it, it was just like, thank God, because on that day I just had so much conflict. Like, are you selling yourself out here just to win? Do you know what I mean? Instead of cheering and being the dude that you normally are, why, and then when they called my name, I was like, fuck that, I'm in. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because if you're spending like all your time like supporting everybody else that's like in your group, or you're wandering around and like and cheering for everybody else, you kind of like don't give yourself the time to like prepare yourself mentally and prepare your equipment that you might need. And so I always have a similar conflict. Like, am I doing a disservice to my performance by cheering on and not preparing my gear? But then if I'm spending too much time with my gear, am I like doing a disservice to like my closest friends, and even like those new guys who it's their first ever comp that really need that support? So
yeah, that's it, bro. That's it. And like, they're look, when you look at that upper level of the game, bro, and I'm lucky being in New Zealand, I've been surrounded by the top level world climbers my whole life, bro. And but Scotty, Jimmy, all of the like, they give, but they always take the time to make sure that they take care of their business. And in that masters bro, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it because we done the walk around, but I was walking around the tree, bro, just like clicking my heels, being like, yeah, I'm in the Masters. I did it. You know what I mean? Whereas like Scotty was in that Masters circle, walking around, analyzing angles, swings, what's going to look cool, how it's going to happen. And when I saw his climb, I realized, oh shit, you just wasted like the 15 minutes they gave you to stand underneath the tree. You were just too like up in your head, like, yeah, you did it. And like, but I had done leading up to that year, I would have done 100 masters of my own, you know what I mean? Just like setting up masters, doing them myself, all of that stuff. Like, I'll never forget it by walking across to Scott. And you know, like he's Scott Forrest, but he's like the king as far as like climbing goes or anything like that. And I'm walking across and I'm like, bro, Scotty, I've never been so ready. And he was like, really? I was like, bro, I've done so many masters this year. Like I have. But while I was saying that, I had failed to look at the climb that I was about to do. And this dude is the world champ, but realistically, none of us, like, you know, we did have the opportunity to, but that's Scott Forrest. You got to give him the respect that a champion deserves. And he still walked around that tree and analyzed it like he had to. He gave the respect that it deserved to the, you know, I just got caught up in the moment, like, yeah, I did it. And I didn't and that's the level that he's at, that he's not taking for granted that, and he hit, you probably remember it, but you were in that master circle. He hit the swing across from one station to the other, where he cut across a good 25 meters of the tree just through air, descending, and like nailed it. And I didn't even see that swing. You know, I spent 15 minutes looking over the tree and I didn't see that swing as being something that was in here. Whereas he had seen that swing and kind of built a climb around that epic moment. And it's just like, oh yeah, step your game up. You know, and like by 20 years of climbing, and that's still how I'm thinking. I'm still thinking, step your game up, Zane. It's time to go, you know? And so yeah, I love comps, bro. Comps.
Mate, but that's the best way to be, because if you ever get to a point where you're just satisfied with, right, this is as good as I'm going to get, I'm like either at work or in the comp, I've plateaued and I'm happy and I'm just going to go to work every day and do what I do. Like I'm hoping that I'm the type of person that for every day for the rest of my life, especially being an arborist, I'll go to work trying to do better than I did the day before. Like if I just kind of settle for, right, I don't need to learn anything else now, I'm almost like failing at life and as an arborist. Like I always want to learn more and do more and be a better arborist and learn new techniques and be smoother, be safer, be more efficient. And if you're just like happy to turn up and get paid, then I don't know, you're doing yourself a disservice, aren't you?
Yeah, bro. And like, I think that's, you know, being one of the biggest advantages, bro, to being underneath these, like, but I'm really lucky. You know, I am really lucky being down in New Zealand and stuff like that. And you've got these people like Jimmy and Scotty, and like those are the big names, but pushing them forward, bro. They're standing on the shoulders of people like Paul Kenny, Drew Bristow, Ross Kite, Matt Glenn. Like there's all these just like John O. Smith, Dale Thomas, me, all these Andy, all these names of people who are, you know, just on that level, and that has pushed them up. And when you're surrounded by that, it's so humbling. You kind of know, oh shit, I have to keep learning. That dude knows this guy knows this guy knows this. And if I was in someone like Scotty's position, I don't know that I'm not the type of person that wouldn't just like rest on his laurels and be like, yeah, I'm gonna go, don't have to do anything else now. Yeah. But he's not like that, and it means that no one else around him can be that way. And like you go places, bro, like when I go to when I was in Australia, same thing, you know, Scotty was there at a certain time, but then you had your Jamie Boston's, your Terry Boston's, like this, like, you know, it's that iron sharpens iron thing where you know, if you're around good people, you kind of are forced to always accept, man, I've got so much room to grow. You know what I mean? And like that's always been the case with me. It probably in some ways though, bro, like I when single lining, around 2007 and 8, when single lining started to really make a entry into the game, or when we were all playing with these single lining systems, that was probably a big disadvantage to my competition climbing because it kind of took such a long time to transition into comps. So I was on my uni for years or on a wrench for years, but you weren't able to. And now I see the way that Scotty works a double line, and I'm like, man, those extra 5 years that he was on that double line, it really shows in how he can tend slack, all of that type of stuff, which isn't the same way you manage a system when you're on a single line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, never seen anybody tend slack like Scotty does. It's just like, it's like his arm moves 5 times quicker than anybody else's can. It's like, it's ridiculous.
I had a conversation the other day. We were watching a couple of like your videos, uh, and he was tending slack faster on a double line in the same spots than someone could tend it on a single line. And it's like, do you know how fast you have to be moving to move double the amount of rope faster than a person can move a single piece of rope? You know what I mean? It's just like this dude is just like, but he's always been on those systems. So there's, it's that 10,000 hours. He's just got that type of stuff so dialed, works so well. It's no wonder,
Yeah, man. When the zigzag first came out, he must have been like, this is like the dream I've been waiting for because it's so smooth, and a lot of the time it will actually like self feed if you've got the right angles, and it's so like intuitive to what a hitch was like, but it's just mechanical and it's smoother, and he must have just been like, praise the Lord.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And that was one of the other things, bro. Like when I think about comp climbing, I was for the longest amount of time, a good 2 or 3 years, I was like, no, I'm just going to wrench any climb that they would allow me to do that in, or but you got to kind of follow suit sometimes. If the climb dictates that climb is one for a zigzag, then you need to be able to like kind of go both ways in these things and not be so kind of closed-minded that you're kind of cutting things off for yourself. You know what I mean? That, okay, this definitely does speak to her. And so because some of the better, like when I say the better, people like Scotty, Terry Boston, Jimmy, they'll do it on a zigzag. Who am I to argue with that? And so will I now. Yeah. I'm not too proud to say, oh, look, I can jump onto that system as well. And I'll usually wrench a rescue or something like that. But never be too proud to do what the best dudes are doing sometimes, because that might be the right thing to do. That zigzag is a good little device,
Yeah, I definitely felt like those first couple of years where the wrench was allowed in competition, everybody who had ever climbed on a wrench did it in the competition just because you were allowed. Like, no matter what the climb was, no matter if it suited it or not, it was like, well, I climb on a wrench, I'm going to show that, I can do the single line stuff. And it was almost like an ego thing to be able to climb on single rope, even if it didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, but I mean, back in the day, when I copped that, because I got ousted at the Nationals one year when I decided that, even though they told me not to, that I would do the rescue on a unisender, and they're like, it was massive. Back then, when you were pushing to have single lining into the comps, I could see a reason for people to, this system and these devices, they deserve a place in the industry. I can understand doing that. But nowadays, if the climb calls for you to do it on a double line, don't be so kind of like egotistical just to prove that you don't have to, And I do love that. One of my favorite things about Red Bull last year was just that it was like Scotty did it on on a zigzag. Sam did it on a runner. They were seconds apart from each other. So like the reality is there isn't that much difference between the two. So like adapt them for when they're most suitable. Is
Yeah.
just like that's my philosophy nowadays, rather than just like I used to be like single line everything. You know
I, th-
what
I
I mean?
think I think you're actually doing Sam a disservice there. I think it wasn't a couple of seconds. I think it was like a
A
second.
second. That's what I mean. I am doing it. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, hard out. But that was one of the most, as far as comps go, and Red Bull's just like a totally different thing to the other comps, but that was like a thrilling when everyone was kind of like huddled around each other, like checking their own times and like, what did you get? What did you? And then it was kind of like put it out. Oh, I think Scotty was like a second in front. And at that time, I was like, 1 second? Is this what it's going to come down to? Like, just so different to another type of tree climbing. So, yeah, that was an epic kind of comp that day.
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose going on to that, the Red Bull comp, obviously a completely different type of competition climb than what we're used to. Like because it's so new, does it give you more of an excitement factor, or is it just because it's so much better and more spectator friendly and more intense and everything that you think it's just? I don't know. What's your opinion? Is it a better competition, or do they both
Right,
have
like
their place?
they're just so like one speaks to so many different things, and then the other speaks to the speed and the spectacle of it. And Red Bull is like the most amazing of event, and the climbing is as good as you'll see at any climbing comp anywhere. But it is way different. It's way different. You know what I mean? And it's ah because if you've been in arboriculture for just ages and ages and ages, when you see some of the things that are going on there, you're really taken aback. Like, what the hell? Not so much the swinging things, but sometimes the slack and things, and the all-out kind of aggressiveness of the climbing that goes on there, from where you kind of in the other comps, it's like smooth and efficiency, and this is like, man, don't worry about grace, don't worry about anything. If you headbutt that branch on the way through, so be it. Kick the bell, let's go. You know what I mean? Like that's like, it's so cool too, but it's definitely not as arboriculture centered. You know what I mean? I think they're doing that on purpose as well.
Oh, it's definitely been created to be pure spectator sport, because I
Yeah,
suppose I suppose that's what Red Bull always put their name behind. They're never gonna put their name behind like the ISA style of comp, because it's too slow paced, and it's too like there's a lot of different moving parts that aren't necessarily is going to get people to watch. Whereas like those big swings are what you can make a highlight reel out of, and that's what they're all about, isn't it? Really.
yeah. That's right, but and they're just like the thing I love best about Red Bull is it's always the trees. The trees are always so dope, man. Like always, like getting to race around in big ass trees. Like they're a step above what you do at most like ISA comps. They're just grander, they're bigger, and that's cool. And I love trees, man. Like I'm an arborist through and through, but I'll be lying if I didn't say like I love looking across like the void and being like, yeah, bro, I'm going there. You know what I mean? Like that's real cool too. And I know Red Bull would be a lot different if I switched my style midway through my climbing career, because a lot of people would be like, oh, Zane, you're quick but you're rough. You're moving through the tree but you look kind of scrappy. So I had to, you might have had to, man, this is feedback from judges usually. So I've had to kind of like tighten everything up and kind of adjust my style for comps at least to be a little bit tighter. And I know that transitioning back for Red Bull is something that's just not as easily done, because I've spent ages just making sure that I've got this routine of like pull, thread. And at Red Bull, there's a lot of like, you don't need to worry about that slack, you're jumping back into that slack in a second. Don't do those things you do in comps. And yeah, that's what I quite like about it as well. It's just the adaptation though.
Yeah, it's yeah, definitely a different style of competing. But I find that the guys that climb the best, like say, let's say the guys in the final, like Scotty, Sam, Ryan, those guys, they they don't really seem to make a mistake. Like if they have a really tidy run, it looks as smooth as what you would imagine in like an ISA comp, because you have
Yeah,
to
definitely.
they have to be faultless to actually get the winning time. So it has to be like as smooth as it possibly can be. And I remember, I mean, Scotty's final climb to win the whole competition was amazing, but the one that stood out for me was his quarter-final climb, because I think it was maybe even the first climb of the Red Bull comp that I'd seen Scotty climb, and his quarter-final climb was faultless, and I was like, oh my god, that is
Yeah, but
incredible, because he was
yeah,
like so smooth but so fast, like blew everybody else out of the water. Um,
yeah. Like by that what I'm saying about the scrappiness and stuff, that doesn't transcend to the very upper echelon of it. Do you know what I mean? It's just that you see a lot of that over the course of the Red Bull weekend.
oh yeah,
Not everyone
definitely,
who's
yeah,
floating around there is looking like the Grants and the Scotties, where they're just like dashing through air and being hella accurate. You definitely saw a few people that were hitting those swings, bouncing off trunks and shit like that. And
oh
it's like,
mate, yeah,
whoa. Which, like, bro, I was doing that too.
yeah,
But,
me too.
you know, there's no questioning, bro, that when you're someone at that level, Scott Forrest, a Terry Boston, a Ryan, any of that type of stuff, Toby, Sam, they're all dope. Like that will do good in ISA, and it will do, but it's the other portion of the climbing where like there's this
Yeah,
the 30 behind the first 20 where it's just like, man, there's a lot of kind of bashing around and dumping
yeah.
out going here. There were definitely a few moments. There was one in particular, I think it was on the training day, where I just seen someone open up on his runner and it didn't hold, and he just kind of like shot past the branch, and I was just like, damn. And that doesn't happen so much at ISA comps where you're like, holy shit, did you just see that?
Yeah.
So,
But I'm surprised that there wasn't more people being taken off in an ambulance, because I saw some
the year
pretty.
before, there was one station. This is in the final run, and everyone kind of done the same route. But Ben Abel, he said to like, "Oh, I'm going to swing from that station over there to that one over there." And when he did it, like he almost landed it properly. It put him in the wrong part of the branch. Like, he was taking a, but Jesus, the swing, I was looking at it like, fuck, that is like so ballsy type, and like, that's what Red Bull can be about sometimes. Now, admittedly, he didn't win or anything like that, but what I witnessed that day, I was just like, oh, we're never going to see that anywhere else. Yeah. She's like, oh yeah, all right then. And like, but not that there was anything unsafe about it. It's just unexpected. It's not the same thing that you're used to seeing at comps. You see these graceful little swings that have been set up to land, and then you're seeing people who are just taking a shot at it.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you so moving on from the comps, how did you become like a teacher? You're a teacher at like a polytechnic or something?
Yeah, bro. So I'm like at a uni tech over here. So I'm just like a lecturer, but flipped it. I came back from Australia. This is after working for Treescape for years, bro. And I was actually I'd moved in kind of like to a training role in the last year that I was with Treescape over there, still on the tools. But then when I first came back to New Zealand, there was just a job that came up, and I knew the dude who was in the role, and I was like, oh, I'd like to take a shot at that. And then because by nature of where it's located, like my uni is located in like the most poverty-stricken parts of New Zealand, where there's just like big crime rates and all of that. Like, but it's the most beautiful place in the world if you're from there, and but there's a lot of like stigma surrounding it. So, the moment that it popped up for me, I was just like, oh, that's what I want to do. Like I made a fair bit of cash in Australia, and my missus makes good money, and I was just like, cool. That would I want to go back to South Auckland and be able to kind of like find the 16-year-old Māori that's running around with no, they got kicked out of school, and kind of give him the things that I was given to allow him to maybe be something of the success which I was able to become. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so and since I took that on, I think I started there in 2017. It's just like it's been wicked for me. It's been good for my climbing because now all I do is just like teach climbing. So we go out into parks, or we'll get given good jobs by different people, and we can just like take our time with them, and you can kind of instill some of the kind of philosophies that we've spoken about here, just into some of these kids, and then to some of them, but you just can't, like, you can't reach everyone. But arboriculture is such an awesome vehicle for a teenage dude who has like all this angst inside him and doesn't really know what to do. You
yeah.
know
Needs
what
to
I
like
mean?
expend his energy somewhere, and like being able to get out and actually be physical and climb is
Yeah, yeah.
one of the
And by like
yeah.
by the pressures of the world and all of that stuff, they all seem to float away. But when you put a 66 in my hand and a helicopter flies over top of me, there's only one thing on my mind, and that's that like these cuts match up. So like tree work is like ultimately therapeutic to me, especially climbing, because when I'm up in the air, bro, like that's all I'm thinking. I have to be so zeroed in on everything that's going on in that space, that everything else, like your wife nagging or whatever it might be, that you don't think about that stuff while you're climbing. And that's what I love, and that's what I know, that when I when I have these like, it's so funny because I get these like tough kids that have gone through like the shittest lives sometimes, and like they're all hard, but then you put them up in these trees and they're all like, holy shit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And then you like the true merits of one's character are really revealed in those
yeah,
moments. You know what I mean? And then like there's nothing like it, bro. You finish a big tree, you come down, you feel good about yourself.
yeah.
And watching some of these students who have never really had that before have it, it's just like, bro, sweet, meanest, good decision for what to do
Yeah, yeah.
with my life.
Yeah, so I imagine it's a really good way to strip down somebody's ego the first time they get put in a tree, because I remember the first time I climbed a tree at college and I was terrified. And I imagine for most people it's the same, because you're using all this safety equipment that you've never used before, so you don't have that trust in it that you do once you've been doing it for a while. And even if you're not afraid of heights, it's maybe the fear of like slipping out of your spurs, or not trusting that the rope's going to hold you, and all this kind of stuff. So like even the biggest, butchest, most like,
100%.
confident like teenager is just going to be brought right back down to earth. And
Yeah, like, bro, it's crazy. It is a great equalizer. I do have some teenagers, bro, that I put them in harnesses, they shoot off, and I'm like, whoa, where are you going? Like, slow down. And those guys are awesome as well. But just the other week, where I have a student up in the tree, and you can see in his eyes, like, but everyone can see it, but you know what I mean? Like when someone is freaking out up there, a good arborist notices it. And I'm like, bro, you just sit up there, get used to it. This is a part of it too. Becoming comfortable with uncomfortable moments is really important. So, if you're not feeling too comfortable, just sit up there, you're not coming down. And then a girl, same class, just goes running past there on the same branch. And it's like, yeah, you think you're tough, dude. And I'm sure you've had a tough life and you're hard, but like this is a real challenge for you, is to see whether or not you can kind of like overcome these, that feeling inside you sometimes. And some people do, bro. And when they do, that becomes something that I know for me, that became the thing that I was addicted to more than the climbing, more than it was like, I did it. I did what I didn't think I would be able to do, and that's kind of like what I like instilling in these people is, like climbing is one thing, but I love for trees, that's even better. But giving these people a feeling of accomplishment, even if they're just the smallest part of a team, chipping the stuff up on site, when you cut down that big tree at the end of the week when we're done, you've accomplished something. That's cool. You know what I mean? It's a feeling of success that tree work gives to people so quickly. 2 days, big job, finish it. You all worked hard together. You all have the sense of accomplishment. That's one of the cool things,
Yeah. And how do you like, so going back to the very beginning of our conversation where you said you got you were asking the bosses about wanting to climb the tree for the helicopter job, and they said, turn up at 5 a.m, and then that first cut when you slinged it up and you were saying to the guy, I'm going to go back up there and like it's caught on a branch, and he's like, no, leave it. And you were like, no, I can cut it. And he's like, no, leave it. And you did it anyway. Like, how do you make sure that you get the message across to the guys that you're teaching when they're doing something unsafe and you're like, no, I know best. You need to listen to me. And especially if you've got difficult students that don't like to listen, like to just do what, similar to what you did when you were younger, like if they think they know best, even though they're going to put themselves in a dangerous situation, like when do you decide, let's just leave them to it and hurt themselves and teach them a lesson, or let's just like, I've got to put my foot down?
Yeah, so by all the time. If I know it's not going to wipe them out or hurt them too much, a big part of the way that I train my bosses, if they ever heard this, would be like, what the hell? A big part of the way that I train by is just to make them make mistakes. Like, okay, then you cut it and have that bit of rigging rope come across them and make them crawl out from underneath it. All of that stuff, like I do that but I never put their lives at risk, but I love to show in real world situations. My students who are listening to this will be like, he does that all the time. But there are always like times where I will allow something to go wrong just to be that like small wake up call for people. Like, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. Then other times, but it's such a hard thing to manage. And a lot of the time, but what I do is I just, I'll pick out the students who show the most kind of nous and sensibilities, and I will then, like, you'll do this hard bit here, bro. Can I trust you? We'll have the talk beforehand and go through that. And then the ones that are a little bit dodgier, I put them in the less dodgy situations until like I've built that level of trust with them. I know that that's probably one of the things that should have happened prior to me going up on that helicopter job. But it's just them realizing like, we're actually going to let this crazy little kid up that tree. You know what I mean? Because I look back at it now like, I can't believe that they did that with me. But, there have been some touch and go situations at school where I'll be like, real like, fuck. Not people getting hurt or anything like this, but if you aren't precise in this moment, both me and the person up there a lot of the time, and even if they're right next to me, like sometimes you put your scarf in, you've got your tagline on, the rigging rope's on, but if it doesn't quite pop off the way that you want it to, it comes down the wrong side of the branch or clips your line or just those little things, and I'm relying on your ability to focus and do what you need to do here, let them all know, then you've just got to have that level of trust that they can execute. And sometimes, it goes right, and other times not so much. That's like the shitty thing about being a lecturer,
Yeah. So are you often, when do you just teach climbing, or do you teach like a whole aspect?
So, bro, I only teach the practical aspects of the course. We have other people on course who teach all of the botany and the tree ID and all the theory, but I teach all practical.
Oh, so, nice. You get all the fun stuff. I teach you how to use chippers, excavators, all of that type of stuff. But
look, my like the lesson plan and all of that stuff is basically left up to me. So some days, for instance, very early on in the course, what I'll do is I'll just string some lines, go out to some trees that are like reasonably tall on a windy day for no reason, just put them up there to just like feel what it's like to be up in a tree when it's windy. Don't have to achieve anything. They don't, like I don't like let them in on that, but we're going kind of just because I like to know how people react, give them a sense of like what that's like. Being able to introduce like people to tree work in this environment where like, there's no pressure. You get to they do things slow and calm and kind of like grow them into the things that they're capable of doing. It's a real good way for a person to learn. Eventually within the course we have to take a hard right and make it more production based so that then when they hit the marketplace, when they're going into industry, they're actually willing to work. But so much of it is just getting them like comfortable and willing to just like do things slowly and follow process. Do this way, it has to happen this way. No, your cuts don't go that way, they go this way. No pressure. But then we do a hard right and it's like, you've been told to implement it that way. You do it and you do it that way every time, and let's get quicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you when you first took the job, were you nervous about the fact that you were having to like teach people, like, because obviously like teaching and education is a whole different skill than actually being able to do it yourself, and or was it just you just was so wanting to help people, like you were saying, like that 16-year-old kid like you were, get a fun job and like at least get an opportunity for a career, that you didn't worry about the fact that you were about to go into like a teaching role, and you just
so bro, look, if I was teaching in the more traditional sense of the word, then I probably couldn't do this job. The thing about it is, right, like I know like who my students are. My students are very much like who I was, and I couldn't be taught to when I was young, like, bro, I was just rebellious as a little shit. I couldn't be taught to like I was there to teach you something, but I could be challenged. I could be, so like the way that I approach teaching is probably a lot different to what a lot of teachers do, where you sit down with like your subject matter and you kind of teach things in that way. I'm more like, okay, everyone's going to throw your harnesses on. Today, we're getting to the top of this. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then it's just like push. And like learning is a byproduct of that. You know what I mean? But as far as the whole teaching thing went, the moment I got interviewed for the job, I said to the like, and she was amazing. My first boss was so amazing because she looked at me and the things that I was saying, she was like, you're kind of right for the students here. But I knew, or I wasn't at that age, I wasn't able to be like sat in the classroom and taught this is how you have to do things. And that's why I don't really do it that way. I do it more the way, see how that went wrong? Yep, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like if someone asked me, how would you do it? Then I definitely talk them through the stages and all of that stuff. But yeah, bro, the people that I'm dealing with every day, if you were to teach them like teachers teach, they'd leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like, bro, it's just so fortuitous that I ended up in this situation for a lot of these cats. Because, bro, in the last 3 years, I would have put like 30 students into work in arboriculture. Some of them are dope, and some of them, just the type of people that you were talking about before, the ones who are just, like got arboriculture as a job. They might not want to do it passionately to become someone like you, for instance. But then I do have these other people, bro, and I know, and they have told me, they're just like, fuck, bro, so lucky that we ran into each other. I'm like, same, bro. You've given me that too. You know what I mean? It's like real lucky that we've got it, because I feel good about the place that I'm in and being able to do this. After as long as I had been cutting down trees, bro, a helicopter can fly into me. I can clip a strop and it doesn't even elevate my fucking adrenaline at all anymore. Cutting down big trees, whatever. but I got disenfranchised with that like a long time ago. But I've cut down enough trees. There's awesome projects that I like to be involved in. I still like to help with helicopter crane work wherever I can help and stuff like that. But I get the same buzz out of like seeing kids, and some like by one of my students last year, he qualified for the nationals. But that was like my first helicopter job. When I seen that, I was like, oh wow, like, because, but I mean, he couldn't climb at all. Now he's qualifying for the New Zealand nationals. I know I played a part in that, and that feeling that he gave me was akin to me being able to take down my very first big tree. And so it's like I get to stay in tree work, but I get to keep the feeling that tree work has always given to me by being able to accomplish these cool things, and that's like where I'm at now. That's why I'm loving teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that, because yeah, seeing like teaching somebody and then seeing them implement what you've taught them, like it just makes you feel so proud that it does give you that. Maybe it's not that same buzz of adrenaline, but it's that same feeling of being proud and like and knowing that you played a part in that. Oh, so who was the person that qualified for nationals? You got a name drop.
I've actually had a couple now. Another dude, Richie Holmes, and then he won Spirit of the Comp, which Spirit of the Comp has been like my award for ages. So like when he won it, it was like, these are all like real proud moments for me, and just like okay, and like one of the weirdest things with Dale, he makes Kiwi climbers and stuff like that. Back in the day, way back in the day, he was like 16 when he very first started working with me. I would have been like 19, something like that. He always used to talk about being an inventor. I've been kicked out of school, and I always used to talk about like, when I was at school, I don't know what I want to be. I want to be a teacher or something like that. Now, just by chasing what we want to do in arboriculture, he's inventing shit. I'm teaching people. It's fucking weird. It's just like the way that life takes you sometimes. And, but I always wanted to stay with arboriculture. Even when, in those years where I was like, kind of getting sick of cutting trees down all the time, it's just not the rush that it used to give me. And so I'm so blessed to have this other avenue as well. And that's the thing that I wish for most like long-time arborists, is to find a transition that when you do kind of get sick of the climbing aspects of it, is to kind of like keep that, but broaden it in some way where you're not just doing like tree work, you're doing something else with those skills that you have. What I mean?
You're giving yourself like another option, different avenues to because the thing is, it can be such a single track mind if you're just climbing and you're going to work every day and not thinking about what else you can do within the industry and like within your capabilities, and before you know it, you could be like 45, 50 and still be climbing and still not have another avenue to pursue. So yeah, I'd encourage anybody exactly the same. If there's something you're interested in or you feel like you could do, or even that you have to push yourself into that uncomfortable position of like maybe public speaking, to be able to start like talking to people and like giving presentations and like teaching and that kind of stuff, like you have to open up new doors for yourself. Like they're not, most of the time they're not going to open, and you're not going to for you. You have to go and kind of find them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then it doesn't always work out this way, but it's amazing how the universe provides in those ways. It's amazing once you kind of like make that step and transition into that. Because I didn't know, when I came back to New Zealand, and I was kind of just going to go back to contracting, kick it, still doing climbing. That was going to be cool. And then that opportunity came up, and I was like, I've always kind of wanted to do that. Do I do it? But once I jumped at it, man, so many other opportunities have come from it. And just like, if you don't take that chance, you don't actually know what's behind that door sometimes. And it's really important that you look, because I'm sitting in a place now where I'm like, thank God I took a chance to try and do something that I've never been a teacher or anything like that. Never hung out with like teenagers where I was like person that they were meant to look up to or something like that. You know what I mean? And then like now it's been quite like, but it's been super beneficial to me. Scotty actually pulled me aside one year and was like, "Bro, I actually think you're climbing better because of that role that you're doing, because you're like, I'm being forced into this place where I have to be like more of a role model or something like that, you know what I mean? Or like act accordingly. And because of that, I might train a little harder. I might push myself, because I've got all of these students who turn up at the nationals and they're like, oh, you've been my teacher all year. Are you any good? You know, it's like, oh, fuck, better try.
What it is, I don't know if you find this or not, but I feel like when you actually teach people, it forces you to analyze how you do it yourself. Because like when you go out and climb, and when you go out and compete, most of the time you might have done it just off of like autopilot, and yeah, you do some training, but you don't really think about how you're doing it. Whereas when you have to, even if you're teaching like the newest of the new, you have to be able to explain it in such a way that they can understand it, and so it makes you think, right, how do I explain how I do this? And then you think about how you do it, and then you start analyzing your own climbing skills, and then you can improve your own skills, because you realize what you might not be doing, like to maximize, you know, the technique.
I've had moments where I've been like, students standing behind me, maybe like either tying something or demonstrating something, explaining it to them, and then midway through I've got this like sense of like, oh shit, oh that's, yeah, like, you know what I mean? It's just like I've just taught myself that in the middle of this lesson, and I've kind of got to play it off like I already got it, you know what I mean? But you have these like, and they'll be about like the most intricate details about how a knot sits back on itself. Oh, it's just something, you know what I mean? But like through explaining it, you're kind of getting your reps up, and you know, it's been my rescues were always all right, but at the moment, my rescues are a lot better, because I'm always teaching rescues and going through those rescue procedures and drilling all of those things. So you find, at least I do now, myself in a position where the things that I'm talking about through the rescue procedure are so second nature. I'm thinking about other stuff while I'm saying the words that are there. And so that's, do you know what I mean? Because I'm teaching it all the time. It's so ingrained into me now that when I go into the rescue circle, I would have to be doing a rescue well outside of what I'm used to for me to like mess my talk up or anything like that. And so that's been really beneficial to my like comp career as well. Because I still contract, and so I'll still go out and work for people, you know, like companies. And all the time they'll be like, oh yeah, see the tech coming out on you, because I'll be doing like, I'll do like a wing cut or something like that on my scarf, and they'll be like, you never used to do wing cuts, but I've got to teach that stuff now, so I find myself like doing it, you know what I mean? And yeah, they're not bad things, but I do know that the companies that I contract to, they definitely notice that I'll do things I didn't used to, these different like procedures, and it's like,
that's good. That's good, mate. Because if you're teaching it, it's got to be like the correct and safest way to do it. So the fact that you're doing it even when you go out and contract, like you can't knock yourself for doing it the right way.
Yeah, but well, the thing is, because I've got these, you know, like I've lived these two different lives. Like this one life where I was like hard out on the tools, and you were like, you know, holding your 66 with one hand, cutting through the last of your helicopter, you know, like cut or something like that, to this point where like now I've got all these students running around out there that think that I've never held an O2O one-handed or something like that. You know what I mean? So now every time I go places, when I'm operating my O2O, and like before the last however long, 8 years, I've always tried to operate of late, you know, last kind of 10 years, two-handed on a top handle chainsaw. But I know people who know me from prior to that time, and they're like, whatever, dude, you used to one hand above your head all the time. You know, it's just students now, if they were to see me do that, they'd be like, you chewed my ass out for doing that. Like, what are you doing? So, you know.
Yeah, but you just got to tell them, look, I've learned from experience, and so I'm teaching you from my experience. Don't
Yeah,
kind
well,
of
bro, like I've
don't
got
make your own
multiple
mistakes.
chainsaw
Yeah.
cuts on me. You know, cuts on my hands, cuts on my legs from chainsaws. Um, and I don't want any of my like. That's one thing I'm not going to let any of my students do. Just not
Yeah,
purposely
exactly.
cut themselves or anything like that. But I'm always talking about it because it's a real thing. So I know shitloads of people who have cut themselves with chainsaws.
Yeah.
So I want them, you know, and if I ever see them operating one-handed, well, then they're getting in the shit for that. Back when I started, that wasn't an issue at all. Cutting one-handed was like, hold your rope here, cut like that. That was the thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just not now.
But yeah, I mean, there's been so many accidents and injuries, and like if you if you let somebody go out into the the work environment after teaching them, and they've been taught bad habits, it's just like a matter of time, isn't it? So if you could, do you know what I think? If you're taught the right way before you ever even get exposed to the wrong way, then you've already got the techniques to make yourself efficient enough to do it the right way, that you don't need to do it that like you don't need to cut corners. Whereas if you learn the opposite way around, say if you go and work for a company straight out the gate and they teach you some bad habits, to learn good habits after you've been taught bad habits is so much harder than if you actually get taught the good stuff in the first place, to
Yeah, bro.
to go the
Definitely.
other way around.
When Andy went over to London, he went there for however long, and he came back, and I was still at Treescape. We got sent to this job, and reduce over whatever it was. And I got up there and done it. He was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Because I've never been taught how to do a proper reduction, bro. Like and unlearning all of the stupid shit that I had done before in order to learn how to do a reduction like properly was one of the biggest learning curves of my career, because I had drilled all of these stupid things into myself, like, I won't cut the center out first. I'll go out to the edges because then it'll make it easier for me to throw things out. But then I'd get back to the center and all of my lines would look stupid. So, him and teaching that, just I had to unlearn half of the stuff that I'd done. And so now that's why, like, you spend a year with me on course. Or no, you're not going to come out there the biggest ninja ever, but you're definitely going to have some like better habits than if you'd gone out into the industry and just tried to wing it. You're going to have like this foundation that will allow you to grow into a good arborist, and it's once you don't have those, once your foundation is made up of like really stupid techniques, man, it's so hard to get that out of your game.
Yeah. I don't know, like, you're probably aware, but so in the UK now, the HSE have said that they have to use two ropes like all the time,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people are pushing back against that. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to stick or if they're actually going to overcome it and push back enough that the HSE will kind of like backtrack a little bit. But if they do stick with it and say that you have to climb on two ropes all the time, I'd be really interested to see the climbers over the next like 5 years, if they come out of college having only learned to climb on two ropes, if they're going to be like way more efficient than what most people could imagine you could be on two ropes at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure they
Because
will be,
if
bro. And any time that happens, like you take like, bro, I was lucky to be at the forefront of like the SRT stuff when it very first started coming out, and but the amount of creativity that came out overnight, just redirect this, you know what I mean? And that will be the same thing that happens when you're putting in two roping points. All of a sudden, people will like learn something, and they'll be like, if you do this and you do that, it can make your life so much easier because you just have more things to play with once you're doing that. And I'm sure that years from now, you would be looking at it as something that wasn't so inefficient like the way that we look at things now. Because I know for a fact, when I was young, using a chainsaw two-handed was definitely looked at as a way less efficient way of, well, why would you do that? Why would you take the time to position correctly when you could do just as good a cut, like, like flicking your chainsaw around like that? And now, I don't know, like, put anyone in the tree cuts one-handed with me and do just as competent a job just as quickly two-handed as anyone, because repeated those habits so much that now they're just second nature.
It's just ingrained. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. You know.
Yeah. Well, I reckon we'll leave it there, Zane. But I just want to say thanks very much for giving up some time and chatting with me and just kind of giving a bit of your backstory and talking competitions and all that. And yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, bro. Keep in touch. All the same old shit.
Stay safe with all this coronavirus stuff.
I can't even leave the house, bro. So I'm all good.
That's the thing. You'll be all right physically, but you might go mental. So
yeah, bro, big time. All good. All right. I'll hear from another time, bro. Stay in touch. You're the man, bro.
Take it easy. Cheers, bro. Nice one. Bye. This podcast was sponsored by Jobber. Jobber is a business software and they support the Climbing Arborist podcast. So I'm really thankful that they do support our podcast, and it means that I can have these great conversations and put them out for you guys to listen to. So thank you very much, Jobber, and go over to the climbingarborist.com website, click on the Jobber banner, and you can get yourself a free trial and then 20% off your first 6 months if you sign up for Jobber. So go and give it a try. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.